Welcome to the latest episode of Five on the Floor, the Five Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app on Apple Podcasts, on Android, Spotify, or the Five Reasons YouTube channel. Also, make sure you subscribe to Off the Floor. I'm supposed to mention that later. Go to the description here. You'll find the link. You can bypass the Apple upcharge of $1. You can pay $2.99 per month. You can cancel at any time. You get access to 10 different channels, and our stage shows the most heat anywhere. That means the most conversation and the most information. Also, check out the great sponsors of the Five Reasons Sports Network. Includes our friends over at All Pro Construction Builders, South Florida residents. So you're looking into protecting your home or business with impact rated windows or doors, reach out to Danny, 305-484-4429. That's 305-484-4429. Make sure to mention Five Reasons Sports. You get a 5% discount. That comes on top of the free estimate, and they can help you protect your home in less than 8 weeks. Family owned and operated, huge Miami Heat fans. You only deal with the owner, our guy Danny, from start to finish. Again, it's 305-484-4429. And now, today's episode.
Down the Biscayne.
Yikes. Five on the floor, ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing, you can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars, wearing bubble frogs.
Down the Biscayne.
Kept the floor playing, got it all band. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat we trust, it's power, have the guts. We're here to bring the heat, y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to Five on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, Alex Toledo, Brady Hawk, and others from the Five Reasons Sports Network. Also, make sure to subscribe to Off the Floor for the most heat anywhere.
Well, welcome back to Five on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me, Ethan J. Skolnick, at Five Reasons Sports. I got Brady Hawk. You can follow him at Brady Hawk 305. Alex Toledo, you can follow him at Tropical Blanket. We've been putting up episodes, trying to get you ready for the last third of the season. It's not really the last half of the season. Miami Heat currently in the 9 spot in the Eastern Conference, which puts them in a play-in game. And it puts them 20th in the league overall, which we keep mentioning this because that may affect where they end up in terms of their own draft pick if they don't make the playoffs. And we'll obviously have done episodes on that, and we'll do more. But we do want to deal with the games at hand here. So we've done some episodes related to that, and we really haven't had a chance, other than on some post-game shows, to dive into what the key player in the Jimmy Butler trade has been doing since he got to Miami. And he's only played in 2 games, and that's Andrew Wiggins. He missed the third, but he's going to be ready for after the All-Star break. And this is a player who was the number 1 overall pick in his draft. This is a player who at one point people were kind of comparing to like the next LeBron, not from a physique standpoint, but like this is how badly teams wanted to jockey for position to draft him first overall. And then when he was drafted first overall, because the Cleveland Cavaliers were getting LeBron James back from Miami, he was immediately traded to Minnesota for exchange for now Heat player Kevin Love. So there's a lot of connections here. And I guess I'm raising this at the beginning because this is not your normal sort of 3-and-D player. This is a 3-and-D player who was expected to have tremendous upside. In Minnesota, he was asked to carry the offense at times, along with Karl Anthony Towns. Zach LaVine was drafted in his draft class, developed a little bit later. Jimmy Butler came in there, took them to the playoffs, which was something that hadn't happened before. And then Wiggins essentially kind of flailed a little bit until he ended up in Golden State and was pretty much the second best player on a championship team behind Steph Curry. So that's who the Heat are getting. The last couple of years have been a little choppier, but this season was better, particularly from the three-point line. I don't think anybody believes, and I'll go to you, both of you guys on this. I don't think anybody believes at this point that Andrew Wiggins is a star caliber player, correct? Is it how would you characterize him, Brady?
I would say he has the flashes of all-star potential like he did in that Warriors year. It's like that's kind of the highest I think you could go. But I think at this stage, he's just a really effective wing, two-way wing. I mean, I think that's kind of the best way. I don't think I'd call him a role player. I'd call him a star. I just think he's a pretty good player. And I think the key with it is just because he's a two-way wing and offensively he's not something specific, like with his not only his potential but his specific role. I think that's kind of my main thing when I look at how they can use him the rest of the way of this season is they have to use him like that. Like they can't look at him like right now during this All-Star break and say, okay, we need to use Wiggins like this because we don't know and they don't know, and I don't think he knows exactly what should be his role on this new version of this team. And when I say that, I mean, like I think about kind of like Jaime last year, but in an elevated way of the way he was used, where they didn't know what Jaime was going to bring. And there was days after games where Spo would say, I didn't run one play for him. I think they need to make things easier for Wiggins, but I think there's a case to be made that you've got to let him play freely and do many different things, check many different boxes because he's not a specific spot up shooter. You don't want him only sitting in the mid post. You don't want him always kind of having to finish through contact on hard drives, but you want a mix of it all. So I think they have to find a way to let him play freely. It's gonna be an adjustment not only for him but I think for Miami just because they are not used to that. They're used to running specific stuff. Wiggins is used to playing in a system with Golden State where he's been a little bit more off the ball and a secondary creator, which is a little bit similar. But I'm interested to see that. I just want them to almost be like an elevated version of the way they used Jaime last year, where they let him play free, let him do certain things, and fight. Like there was I think the very first possession of Wiggins in a Heat uniform was they threw him off a curl, like an off-ball curl. He curled inside and he got to the paint. I think either he got fouled or he did something inside the paint where that's the stuff I want to see from him. I want to see them getting Wiggins on the moves, not the standstill stuff where he's just kind of having to create slowly in a pick and roll or spot up threes. Get that man moving. This is a young team. Everybody should be moving. It should be constant half-court movement, running the floor in the open break. So I just think they have to kind of treat this almost like a college system. Just let things play a little bit more freely than the standard stuff they're used to. And this is time for Eric Spoelstra to experiment. This is what he's always used to doing. This is that's been made him great over the last few years.
Well, you look at Andrew Wiggins, first 2 games in Miami, shot 7 of 24 from the floor, 3 of 13 from 3, had a total of 9 free throw attempts, made 7 of them, totaled 9 rebounds, totaled 8 assists, had 3 turnovers. It was pretty pedestrian. And I know we were talking as we were watching that there are some parts of his game, Alex, that are not at an elite level, and they're going to have to coach around a little bit. The thing that jumped out to me after not watching him a lot since that year when he went to the finals and won the championship with Golden State is he's not a real secure ball handler. He's not Jimmy in that regard, and we're going to have to talk about Jimmy in this episode because Wiggins has essentially taken his spot or his position. And it's funny, when we were talking about players that would fit next to Hero, Wiggins is a player that I know others on the network talked about a lot. Like, okay, he'd be a good fit next to Hero. He's not actually technically playing next to Hero in the backcourt because Davion Mitchell is currently starting, but he's basically playing in Jimmy's old spot. He's not the ball handler that he is. He doesn't get to the line like Jimmy does. I want to focus on the offense here first. He is a better three-point shooter on volume once they get to it. But I'm curious with you, Alex, where do you think, and Brady got into some of this, but where should they get him his touches? Should it be, I mean, you're not going to be running a ton of high pick and rolls with him, but I assume, again, we talk about the secondary actions, some of the cutting. What kind of threes do you want to see from him? What should the shot diet be for him?
I think to Brady's point, a bit of everything because he's not lead out thing. I think he's a guy who you want to see some paint just from, like you guys are already talking about. He is not the one that's going to create the paint touch on his own from a standstill position, right? Like he didn't have that in his bag. His handle is not tight enough to be able to do that on a consistent basis. I think he is a guy who excels on the move as a driver, as a cutter, like playing off of a defense that has been bent already and advantage has been created. And I think, we can talk about the roster construction right now. And I think if we're being frank, like he can excel here and be positive. And I think he will be, but I think he won't be optimized here in this current roster construction because they don't have enough advantage creators. They don't have enough guys who will, cause an overreaction. And I think, about 57 of his 60 minutes right now play have been with Bam. And, that's kind of been what, the role they've given him so far is like you're in that starting lineup and you're most likely going to be playing with Bam. And I see the vision there, right? But without Bam, minutes have been terrible. I've been looking to see how they mix him into the rotation outside of just a starting lineup. So that's going to be something I'm monitoring. But as far as his actual shot diet, I think, you get him on the move as a cutter, as a driver. I think you asked me like what type of threes. I think mostly catch and shoot. I was not a fan of some of the moving threes he took, and not to be too like reactionary to a 2-game sample, because I'm sure he's capable of making more than he did. But I think a lot of the shots that he was taking and missing over these couple of games were like the set broke down, the play broke down, they weren't able to find something, and they just kind of have Wiggins hoist up a shot just to get a shot up, right? I don't think he's that type of guy. I think if there isn't like an angle for him to take advantage of, and where you can use, he can take advantage of his athleticism, I don't think the handle is there for him to be creating his own shots like that in a situation where he gets tossed a grenade at the end of the shot clock. So I think, when things kind of stabilize more and he's playing more of his game and taking more optimal shots, he will look a lot better. But, like they've got to find a way for him to be able to play that game more. And that's why I've been talking so much about the idea of going back to Duncan in the starting lineup and putting Mitchell on the bench. Not, I still want to see that lean into defense lineup. I really like it. But I'm just thinking is like, who's a guy that will grease the wheels of that offense? And I think Duncan is the obvious answer. We've seen it with Bam. It doesn't only help Bam. It helps just about everybody. Tyler has been a lot better on the floor with Duncan this year. If you look at the numbers, specifically the offensive numbers, he's having another guy there who's going to be staple to him, like has helped Tyler know, like, hey, if Duncan is on this side of the floor, I'm going to go use that side, because that help defender is not going to leave Duncan. And I think he knows how to use that to his advantage. Duncan, gets used off ball, on ball. Like there's a lot of different ways he can grease the offense. And that's why I've been thinking about it. Because I think with the way the offense is going right now, like Wiggins and Bam are kind of taking, in that starting lineup, are kind of taking turns being like the second guy. And I don't know if that's the optimal way to do it with the way that the roster's built. I'm just not sure. There's no easy answer there.
Well, and I think that's something obviously Spo's going to have to sort of sort through here. We have talked a lot about other rotation pieces. He's had a few days now. He's going to have another one to kind of look at who fits around who. I think that as we look at him on the offensive end, and we'll switch to the defensive end here in a minute. I think on the offensive end, look, if they could get 17 from him, let's just say, I'm just going to go raw numbers here. They could get 17 from him semi-consistently on 45% shooting, 37% from three. I think they take it. I don't think they're looking for the explosions that, say, Jimmy gave you in the playoffs. But I think if you can get to a more consistent place than maybe you had with Jimmy at times because of sort of the in and out, the lineup and all that. Wiggins used to be a very durable player. Actually, if you go back to early in his career, it's interesting. He played his first few seasons on a mostly bad Minnesota team. He did win Rookie of the Year. He played 82 games his first year, 81 his second year, 82 his third year, 82 his fourth year.
Wow.
Since then, it hasn't been quite so much. Now, he had a death in the family. He's had other things that he's had to deal with in recent years. But again, typically, he's not a guy over the course of his career who missed a ton of time with kind of nagging injuries. It seems like he does want to be out there on the court. Availability matters to them a lot. Obviously, we just spent a whole 6 months talking about that. So I think that helps, and that may help them get some actual continuity with him. I know he missed the game right before the deadline, but to me, it's he's not, again, a give the ball to him, get out of the way type player. He's just not. And I think he was mischaracterized a little bit, because I think when you talk about a number one pick who has that kind of potential, that it was discussed when he was at Kansas, or even prior to when he was in Kansas, when he was the best high school player in the country, there's this assumption he's that kind of guy. He's not. He has to take pressure off Tyler. That's really where we're at. Like that, because Tyler is, and especially after All-Star, is going to get scouted hard. There's no expectation, obviously, anymore of, okay, Jimmy's going to show up and save the day. That's not happening. All the scouting reports are being tilted towards Tyler. I feel like teams are going to let Bam get what Bam gets and try to basically shrink the offense, shrink the court by making things hard on Tyler, making him give up the ball early, showing hard, giving the double teams, all that kind of stuff. And when the ball gets to Wiggins, he's have to be decisive. So him learning what Spoelstra wants to do, him learning the other players on this team is going to matter. The Kerr offense in Golden State is very read and react. It's always what it's been. He's been playing in that system for a while, so he should be able to comprehend things pretty quickly.
He might
He has
get
a high
more
enough
mid-post
basketball
touches
IQ.
as a scorer than the Kerr offense, by the way.
Well, right. No, that's right. And I think, and you look, obviously the Kerr offense kind of leaned threes so heavy because of obviously who they've had, and so much of it is on Steph's gravity, right? So Steph's gravity, reaction, make a play off of that. Tyler doesn't have that kind of gravity. So there's more that Wiggins is going to have to do here, I think, to get his shots, but they have to, and I feel like this is a broken record because we talked about this with Bam. They have to make it easier on him too. I think some of this is going to be action sets. And without having like a true pure point guard, because Davion Mitchell is still not quite that, um, again, a lot is going to fall on him. All right, we want to get into the defensive side of this in a second. Before we do, I want to talk about another great sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. I'm sure I'll see him at the arena when the Heat are back there. Our guy, Eric Rubenstein. You can find him at ericrubenstein.com. If you are injured, you have a car accident, this is the guy to call. This is the personal injury attorney that we recommend. 877-829-ERIC, 877-829-3742. That's ericrubenstein.com. Based in South Florida. He actually grew up in Lauderhill in Broward County, went to St. Thomas University, graduated magna cum laude. Not only is he a smart guy, he's a funny guy too. You got to check out his Instagram, Attorney Rubenstein. He's seriously, he's like the man of, he's like the Forrest Gump of South Florida. Forrest Gump had a law license and was a really great personal injury attorney. He'd be Eric Rubenstein. Check him out, 877-829-3742. The defensive side of this, which we all believe is where this team is going to have to earn its money the rest of the way. Like this, they're leaning heavy into defense. The Bamware duo, Brady and I did an episode on this, 99 defensive rating between them. Wiggins is going to be part of that now. Davion Mitchell is going to be part of that at times. So they may have 4 potentially really plus defenders on the court at the same time. I'll go to you first on this, Alex. What does Wiggins do differently from Jimmy Butler?
You just mean on the defensive end? Well, I think, just guard one-on-one better. I think he's not, and he's like so much more conservative when it comes to defensive playmaking. I don't think you're going to see a whole lot. I mean, look, you're going to see some helping with Wiggins because the Heat are just, that's what they do in their defensive scheme. But I don't think you're going to see the gambling that Jimmy was doing. Like, I think he's much less, he's much more risk averse than Jimmy was in that aspect of the game. And that's not a bad thing. Like, just because that isn't a strength doesn't mean like you're not a good defender. He's a very strong defender, and I think is going to be a good help defender for them. He's just not going to be a guy who's like, maybe trying to steal a base all the time and essentially try to be the guy to force the turnovers. Like, I think he's going to play a little bit more solid, a little bit more disciplined type of defense. I think that's the guy he is. And then on the other thing that he does different than Jimmy is navigate screens better. Just at this point in their careers, I think he's far and away the better screen navigator than Jimmy, right? Not that Jimmy wasn't capable of doing it, but as far as who can you rely on to do it on a consistent basis, yeah, I would absolutely much rather rely on Wiggins to do it than Jimmy at this point. So I think he plays a more solid brand of defense as far as being risk averse, and obviously that was a huge thing, a huge strength for the Heat. Having Jimmy able to do that and create plays out of nowhere. So I'm not trying to like talk down on that, but that's just the differences in their game. The screen navigations, more risk averse as a defensive playmaker. He's going to stay down. He's going to play it just a disciplined brand of defense, be a strong one-on-one guy, and I think be a positive defender overall. I think like anything below that would be a disappointment because I think Wiggins is capable of being that guy. And I think that's where we talk about finding a balance on offense helps him on the defensive side too. Because I think like them trying to overuse him on offense could get in the way of some of that defensive effort. Because we saw in Minnesota, and I know it was a much younger version of him, but when he was being used like that on offense, the defense was not nearly as strong as it was in Golden State when he had a smaller role. So all of it is, again, about balance. But the baseline and expectations with Wiggins for me are so much higher on the defensive end because he's really good.
Well, and the long arms, right? That's the other thing. You're talking about a guy. We talk about length. They've needed length on this team. He adds a little bit more athleticism, which we've gotten into. I think as we look at adding Mitchell to this mix too, that also takes some of the burden off of Wiggins a little bit because I kind of feel like if Mitchell was not in the starting lineup, if Duncan was in the starting lineup, then you're telling Wiggins to essentially guard the best guard that you're facing, and now Mitchell can handle a lot of that. But how do you see it?
So I don't see that is a bad thing, to be honest. I kind of like the idea, honestly, of Wiggins being able to guard a team's best guard or wing player. Uh, Alex was mentioning kind of the differences between him and Jimmy defensively. I'd say one of the bigger ones as well is just Jimmy's ability to size up defensively. Uh, I don't trust his Wiggins like switching all over the place where he's guarding big fours and fives all the time, where Jimmy can make up for it. But with that said, I think Wiggins is more equipped to guard certain guards. Like he's able to go out there and just guard one-on-one, as he mentioned, and stay in front. With that said, if you want to lean into that and you're looking for balance in your rotation, I don't think it's crazy to say that that should be his job defensively, and Davion can play off the bench. And I think that's the biggest thing here. It's not really about plays and sets and everything. I said it the other day on the podcast, the last one we did on Bam and Khalil, and Alex, you just got into it. But I really do believe I'm a big advocate for Davion Mitchell. Like I am a big fan of what he can provide for this team. I think he's going to be a really fun, explosive player. But I do think for the starting lineup to make sense, and at first I thought Davion starting would be the part that makes it make sense. But after seeing it, I just think Tyler Duncan makes more sense for Wiggins offensively. This is the whole key right now. It's just trying to make it look serviceable offensively. And if you do that, Wiggins on the defensive side of the ball is going to be guarding guards. He's going to be guarding certain guys, kind of their best point of attack perimeter player. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think you almost want Wiggins to be involved. Like usually you would say, Jimmy, you want him playing off the ball and playing help, but it takes a burden off of him. Whereas Wiggins, with the stage he's at in his career, I kind of want him involved defensively. I want him getting involved with the game, and then that'll flow into the stuff offensively. You were talking before about like when Wiggins was best with Golden State. He was best with obviously Curry and Clay in the backcourt. He moved down. What just happened recently? It's Steph and Buddy Hield. His best brand of basketball has been with two shooters in the backcourt, with teams overhelping, flying all over the place. He can find misdirections, as you were mentioning, on cuts. Just playing and kind of finding ways to get downhill off secondary actions. This type of brand of basketball, as fun as it is defensively, and I think they can get to it to certain points of the game, but starting off games, I just think they need a pop. They need Tyler and Duncan to play off each other a little bit more. You talk about kind of getting a secondary action guy to take the pressure off of Tyler, and Wiggins could be that, yes, but that could also be Duncan. Like Duncan could be the guy where Duncan and Bam can work off each other, as we know. And they just have a valve. It's like a secondary valve. They have a secondary action where it's more reliable. It's a consistent offensive piece, whereas Wiggins can work into that. I think he could be really good in that role. Not keep comparing him and Jimmy, but that Tyler, Duncan, Jimmy, Bam, Khalil lineup, if Jimmy was engaged, was going to be a fun lineup. Like that was looking good for a good portion of the season. I think you find a little balance if you go to that. You have Davion off the bench for the explosiveness defensively.
Davion and Haywood with Ware. How about that?
Well, what about just saying Jovic as the offensive explosion and Davion as the defensive explosion? Those guys being your 6th and 7th men, and you could work in the 8 or 9 guys. You could talk about Jaime and Haywood, or et cetera, go down the line. I just think it balances out the roster a little bit, and it fits the styles way more. I like the defensive thing, but I think there is going to be a lean here post All-Star break. I wouldn't be surprised if your first game Friday, if they go back to this. I just think they have to throw everything out there. They're 9 seed. They're not, as Tyler said in an interview the other day, Ethan. They're not contenders. They're not contenders.
That's right.
So, like at this point, throw everything out there right now. Friday. Let's see what you got. Throw it all out there, and then whatever happens, happens.
I did an episode of 3 or 5 Guys on that today with Alex Dono, and you can catch that on the YouTube channel. And I agree with Tyler. I'm glad he said it. I like him being so direct about it, to be honest. I just curious how that went over internally, but it was an interesting thing to say. All right, last one. Don't have a lot of time for this one, so let's just get to it quickly here. Let me ask this question. It's more of a theoretical question. Does Andrew Wiggins need to be better than the 3rd best player on this team for this team to have a chance to do anything? In other words, does he have to raise his game where he's more consistently productive as a two-way player, maybe, than Bam and Tyler, who I know are completely different types of players, for them to be anywhere? Or are we comfortable with him kind of settling in as like the third? It's not going to. Okay. Are we comfortable with him settling in as the 3rd best player on this team? Because it feels like that's where this may trend once he gets comfortable.
I'll just say I think they're worse off if that's the case, because if Wiggins gets to a point where Bam's now bump down to the third guy. And if that's
Okay.
the conversation we're having, I think they're in a worse spot as a team.
So your concern is more so it wouldn't necessarily be if Wiggins elevating. It would be back
who's
to
the
the way he
client?
was playing.
Unless you're
prior
telling
to
me
the
his
12
handle's
games before the
tight
All-Star
now
break.
and he's all of a sudden a 22 points per game
Yeah.
scorer efficiently, reliable. Like, no, that's I'm with Brady. It's
Do we
probably not
think
a good thing.
there's anything? Okay, to this point, and then we'll close it. Do we think there's any area of his game that working under a Spoelstra coaching staff can see something we haven't seen from him throughout the course of his career? Like tightening the handle is tough at age 29. It just is. Like I don't know that that's going to happen. We've seen guys have shooting jumps. I guess if they get the ball in better spots, they tweak forms. We've seen that before. Is there any? It feels to me like he's a finished product as a player, right? Like I at this stage, is that fair? Because Jimmy got better. Jimmy was 29, right? They put
Exactly.
the
That's
ball
why
in
you got
Jimmy's
to
hands more.
optimize him. Just use him in his best
Yeah.
spots. A little bit of everything, like we've been talking about. A little bit of the mid post stuff. Not too much, but you get him in that spot there, especially if you try to get a mismatch. Like I think you do a little bit of that. Him going off the catch as a driver, as a cutter. A little bit of the spot up stuff. Even one or two pick and rolls every now and then. Not, I don't want a lot of it, but like he's capable of doing it, especially as like a second action. After the first one, like I think a little bit of all of that, and that's the best Wiggins. As long try to get the best shots possible. You don't try not to have him, trying to create a bunch on his own.
Got it. All right, we're going to close there. Thanks to our sponsors, All Pro Construction Builders. We always mention Prize Picks too. Use the code 5FIVE. Put down your $5, get $50 to play. Sign up for Off the Floor, $2.99 per month. We can't say how long it's going to be that, so get in there now. And also our friend Eric Rubenstein. Go find him at ericrubenstein.com. All right, another episode coming up tomorrow, and then we get ready for games again. Have a good one.
Thank you for listening to the 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. After all, someone needs to listen to my dad.